Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Quality Talks podcast. I'm Stu Day,
I'm Chris Henderson.
and you know that already, right? We're into episode 11, so we don't need to be telling you who we are anymore. This episode is going to be quite a heartfelt episode. We had a discussion, I think it's like last week or the week before, around doing this episode, and we've decided that we're going to do it, and it's all going to be about well-being, self-care, mental health, physical health, and more importantly, how we need to lead by example as leaders in our industry and leaders of teams, leaders of people. Often we neglect ourselves, and so how can we be more aware and be better at that? So we're going to delve into that. We're going to share some of our own experiences. So it's going to be quite an emotional episode, I think. So obviously, if you are going through anything right now, or have been in the past, it's just something to be mindful of as we sort of step into the discussion. But yeah, it's been a good week though, Chris. We hit 200 subscribers on YouTube. 200 subscribers, 200 subscribers. Get in there. So, and I didn't even have to bribe anyone. So that was well, maybe I did a little bit. I did a little bit, but we'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. So yeah, 200 subscribers on YouTube. Not bad. Been going under a year. It'll be a year in, I think it's April time, isn't it? So yeah, under 200 subscribers.
It's nice to see that their platforms are growing. Like we've talked a lot about our LinkedIn presence, and it's incredible to see the numbers on there, but to start and see traction through other platforms as well, and we kind of get an idea of how our audience like to tune into us as well. Whether you like to see we're in person and face, or whether you want to go down the Spotify route and just listen to it. We kind of get an idea of what you like and stuff. So helps us understand you as a community better.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got to give people options. I mean, nobody necessarily wants to see our ugly mugs, do they? Especially not first thing in the morning. If they're on a Sunday morning and they're having their breakfast, they don't want to be looking at this. No. They want to be listening to our dulcet tones, maybe.
Speak for yourselves, Stu.
And, hearing us talk really posh and suave and that sort of thing, but definitely not want to be seeing this whilst eating breakfast. But yeah, it is really just about helping us understand our listeners and our viewers more over time. So that's really, really good insight. Speaking of which, I mean, we have actually got a big announcement, haven't we? What's the big announcement, Chris? Just look, you're like, what is it? What is this? What's this big announcement? Do you know?
That's what I'm trying to think.
Come on, man! You know what this is. Don't play oi coy. You know what this is.
It's a curveball here.
Yeah. Well, we don't rehearse this. Anybody that thinks we rehearse is wrong. We launched a website, Christopher.
Oh, we did. I'm still catching up on things.
So last night, the official Quality Talks website was launched. This has been in the making for a little while. But yeah, we launched it last night. Hot off the press. I mean, by the time this goes out, it won't be hot off the press because everybody will know about it. But anyway, we launched it, and yeah, I'm buzzing about it, to be fair, because it centralizes everything that we're trying to do into one place. So if you want the latest episode of the podcast, you want YouTube channel, audio, there's going to be blogs on there. We're going to be doing a newsletter on LinkedIn. It's going to have links to the books that are being written, and I say books because, as I mentioned before, me and Chris are going to be maybe pairing up and co-authoring a book as well at some point. So yeah, we're going to be doing more books. Still got to finish the first one, but going to be doing more. Potentially future events that we've talked about hosting, and events that we potentially might be appearing at, and previous talks that we've done, links to. It's going to be so much stuff on there. It's not all on there right now, I'm going to confess, but that's going to be the central hub, plus a lot of other offerings that will come later in the future as well. As I say, we've said that 2025 is going to be a big year, and this is the start of it, I feel.
I think this gives everybody, all the listeners, another way to help us grow the community, grow the Quality Talks brand. It's another thing that you can share with your friends, your workplace, to get a better understanding about us, but also keep an eye on what we're doing as well. Like Stu mentioned, various different platforms, see where we're going to be in person next, whether it's a local tech meetup or conferences, or it might even appear at a lunch and learn session in one of your businesses at one time. So
yeah,
possibilities are endless, but at least we'll have that kind of central place to track everything and a place to call home.
Yeah. And we want to do more, we've discussed this, right, Chris? We want to do more on the road type recordings. So whether that be going along to conferences and doing interviews at conferences and stuff like that. So obviously, if we're going to be at conferences, then and you're around, then be up for us, jumping in and maybe doing a little bit of an interview with you, on the road kind of thing. So yeah, I'm really like buzzing about it. And there's a couple of really lovely photos of us on the website. I mean, to be fair, Chris's one's a little bit more.
Well, mine's international, right?
Yours is international, right? But mine was taken at Ministry of Testing Coventry on Thursday night, and I quite liked it. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to use it. So there's a couple of little photos on there of us, and yes. So yeah, you know what, I'm really happy with how it's turned out, Chris. So yeah, we've just got to get all the content on there now, or more of the content on there.
I've just thought of an idea, and I'm just going to throw it out here for you. You know how, if for those of our listeners that know you already, they might know that you have a camper van.
I have a camper van.
You just mentioned about Quality Talks on the road, so you never know. One day that camper van might actually turn onto an on-the-road studio and work into other country.
Mate, I haven't told you, have I? This is hot off the press for you, Chris, and now all the listeners are going to know at the same time. But
we're supposed to tell each other everything, Stu.
Oh, mate, sometimes things just get slowed down in the process. But the camper van's going, and I'm getting a motorhome. So literally, that could become our on the road Quality Talks podcast studio. We can get it all branded up, everything. So that could potentially be a really big venture.
Should we get into the episode, and we can talk a little bit more? Obviously, you mentioned earlier that we're talking more along the lines of well-being in this episode. You can probably see I've changed scenery as well. So in line with the episode and well-being, I've made myself more comfortable than my normal desk situation, and I'm sitting on the sofa, so it's kind of like therapy in session with this one. But
I'll send you the bill later.
Yeah. We thought it was an important topic to discuss, and like we said, we'll share our experiences, and we can appreciate that sometimes the things that we might talk about can be quite triggering. So just look after yourself, and obviously if you need to take time out, or you would even like to discuss how you felt when listening with us, we're there. You can reach out to her, and again, like, any feedback is always welcome feedback as well, and we'd love to hear how it made you feel and your experiences and stuff as well. But we'll go into it. So Stu, from your perspective, when we're looking at leadership and we're looking at well-being, what do you think are the kind of most overlooked factors within our industry? What are the things that tend to get overlooked and neglected?
So from my experience, and look, we've titled this episode self-care, right? And I don't think that there's enough training out there and enough awareness out there for leaders in general around self-care and ensuring that they're looking after themselves when they, in positions of leadership. And I, for one, have suffered with that immensely over the years, right? Fully committed to supporting, those people that I lead and those around me and stuff like that, and not so committed to looking after myself and making sure that I'm okay. And I just don't think that there's enough out there, enough training out there, enough awareness out there within organizations to help people understand that. I've been in numerous leadership roles over the years, and I can safely say I've never had any particular training that is geared towards leaders around self-care and well-being, other than obviously supporting other people. So I think that's something that, for me is really missing and is overlooked. And I don't know what it's like in other industries. I don't know, but obviously I've always worked in tech, so I've always noticed. And actually, that's a lie. I haven't always noticed because I've not been self-aware enough to have noticed. But more recently and over the recent years, I have been more aware, and I have noticed that gap in that sort of training. And I think what really brought it to life for me, and you'll know this, Chris, because you were on the same training when we did the mental health training,
Yes.
first aider training a few years ago. We were on the same course, weren't we?
Shout out to Lisa Wisher as well, who did
the Wisher. That lady is amazing. Honestly, she can turn a really emotional topic into something that's really interesting and energized and stuff like that. And she's incredible. If anybody ever gets to do training with Lisa Wisher, then we'll put a note in a link in the notes to her LinkedIn page and that. But yeah, she's brilliant. But I think it really brought it to life for me in that training, because obviously going on that's not just supporting other people, but it's it talks about your own self and building more self-awareness around your well-being and mental health and such like, and also how physical health and mental health are so connected. If you're suffering with your mental health, it can affect you physically, and if you're suffering with your physical health, it can affect you mentally, right? And we've both been through a lot over the last few years around this kind of stuff, right? I'm sure we'll get into that a bit more, but I think that was the moment I really kind of like became more aware, more self-aware of things, and the lack of potential training that people get, when they get into leadership type roles and stuff like that. So I think that for me is something that's overlooked. And the big thing that stood out for me in that training was we all, from a mental health perspective or just in general, obviously there's that saying of like it's okay to be not be okay. What really jumped out at me, and this is the shout out to Lisa, but she was like, actually, it is okay to just be okay as well. You don't have to put on this front. You don't have to be good. You don't have to be great. You don't have to be amazing. It's okay to just be okay. Right. And I think in the world of social media and, everything you look at is a lot of big smiles and celebrating the good, and I think that's something that really stuck with me from that training. Am I good at it? No, I'm still not good at it. I still struggle with it. If anybody saw the post I put onto LinkedIn last week, that's a prime example where I've just acknowledged that I am struggling at the moment with things. But I feel like there needs to be more done from that point of view to help people understand and realise.
And I think it's one of those things that you always have to practice, and the more you practice, the better you get. But if you're not regularly practicing, you're never giving yourself enough opportunities to self-reflect on your emotions and truly understand when you are feeling triggered, you're feeling anxious, you're getting overwhelmed, you feel your body temperature rising, you're never really able to articulate what that really means to yourself.
Yeah.
And sometimes you've just got to go through that daily routine of just giving yourself enough time to have that space and self-acknowledgement. And like, we talk about leading teams, but it starts with leading self. And we've got to be honest with ourselves and check in with our emotions and just seeing how we're feeling and be able to articulate that into how do we overcome it and what's the next steps off the back of that emotional trigger and that feeling. And I think you mentioned there about like social media and stuff, and how that plays a big influence on things and how we maybe acknowledge struggles or how we want it to be perceived by others. And I think in certainly what I've seen across like motor manufacturing industry and within tech, they're both the same, and I'm sure other industries are the same. I don't think it's to do with the industry. I think it's more us as human beings that when we move into leadership roles, leadership is still, although it is changing, it's still seen as title driven, decision making, supporter to many, and all of this, and it's still seen as a hierarchy, and there is certain misconceptions that come with that. And I think this is why we don't necessarily see a lot of kind of material out there around self-help for leadership and support around the leadership, mental health and well-being. Because people still like have these misconceptions of us within our role, and I think this is the bit that needs to be kind of debunked and thrown out the window. At the end of the day, we're human and we experience it, struggles and things and emotions just the same as anybody else do, but sometimes the nature of our roles and being the support of many actually put on a lot more pressure on our shoulders, and therefore it's even more important to check in and be self-aware, but to speak about it with others. And this is the thing that we need to change. I think open communication about thoughts, feelings and struggles in leadership is seen as a weakness, when actually it's a strength, and it's incredibly empowering to acknowledge that and speak out about your emotions, because it's the one thing that connects us all as human beings, and it makes you so much more relatable as a leader if you're actually able to speak out about it. So the more that's within everybody's gift, to be able to share more about our experiences and talk to others. And I think the more we can do that, the more we can start and try and make a change in society, and then within our workplace environments, and within our friends network, and within our in our companies and stuff, to change that narrative around. And then off the back of that, hopefully we can start and see a trend to a more supportive culture around well-being, where we do have the right resources and materials to help us guide ourselves as well as guide our teams as well.
Yeah, that whole point around essentially being vulnerable, right? And being able to talk about how you're feeling and stuff like that. And, you know, there is this expectation, and there always is this expectation that you need to be there for others as a leader. And I know myself that showing emotion, years ago, showing emotion would be considered a weakness, and you've got to be seen to be strong. You've got to be seen to be not stern necessarily, but you can carry the weight of others essentially. And that was just the way it's all, like, for me, it was always was, as in a leadership position. Now, what happens behind the scenes, you can't say. You're not going to talk about. It's like you just get up every day, you do the job, and then you deal with the other stuff in the background. And obviously, even more so from a male perspective, and we all talk about, being more open as men and talking about this kind of stuff more and more. I think that's just exacerbated in positions of leadership. If you're a male in a leadership position, there's almost like a double whammy there. It's like you've got the sort of the expectation of being a leader and being strong and supportive and stuff like that, and then also from a male perspective, that whole stigma of like, well, men can't talk about their feelings. Obviously there's a lot now where we're trying to fight against that, right? And it's amazing you see so many of these groups that are spinning up that are giving men a voice to be able to talk about things and stuff like that. And I think I really like the idea of having like a leadership network where you can just talk about your struggles and talk about what's going on. And I don't think I've ever actually done that. I mean, obviously we've worked together before. We're good friends, right? But we've also worked together before as leaders, and our leadership team was very open, and we talk about this kind of stuff because that's what we promoted. And I like to think my new leadership team, where I am now is we're building that relationship where we can do the same thing and be honest and be open and be vulnerable. But within an organization, I've never really seen that network where you can kind of go, let's come along and talk as leaders about the things that are challenging us and stuff like that. And, I'm not sure why that is, to be honest. I've never even thought about it. Maybe that's something that needs to be looked at more by our people teams and something to consider. I mean, I've suffered with mental health challenges for years and years and years and years. I've talked about it on this show before about my anxiety, and first dealing with anxiety when I was, first memory I really have of it was when I was about 17, 18, but I'm pretty sure even before that I had some challenges, and I've dealt with it every day since, right? But people don't believe me. I talk to people about saying I suffer with anxiety, and it can be bad anxiety. People are shocked because of the front that I always put on. And that's what we do, right? As leaders, we put on this front, we put on this sort of mask to say, we're here to look after you, we're here to support you, we're here to guide you, we're here to put the weight on our shoulders and deal with not just the weight of the people that we lead, but the weight of the business that we're leading for and stuff like that. And it can become overwhelming, massively so, especially if you've got other things going on in your life as well.
I think like what you were saying there, and it ties back to the social media thing, it just kind of like jumped in my head of what you were saying, the image that I see straight away. It's a bit like an onion. From the outside, you see that kind of tough skin. And when actually in reality, we're built up as human beings as multiple layers. And sometimes like you've just got to get past that tough outer exterior that the world around us sees and realize that there is multiple layers to us. And I think the only way people can do that is by us actually allowing them to see that other side of us. Stop putting on the kind of false front and lead by example and be really open with our leadership style in order to show that, again, we are human. We feel the same emotions and the same stresses as everybody else. And I think that like having that open leadership style really does help us to connect with those that we lead and build stronger relationships where then in turn we can actually better support one another because we're able to have those sometimes difficult conversations with each other a lot more organically, and we build trust and relationships with each other because we know, like, we're asking these types of questions of each other because it comes from a real place of care and understand.
Yeah, I agree. From your perspective, Chris, obviously, you're a little bit younger than me, as we've kind of touched on this podcast a few times now. But so you've not necessarily been in leadership as long as I have, and the different types of roles, and obviously over more recent years, the whole stigma around, men not being able to talk about their problems and stuff like that is starting to, gradually be broken down. Right? It's still, there's still a stigma around it in some cases. But from your perspective, when you moved into your first leadership role, was that something were you out the gun? Were you kind of like that sort of vulnerable leader, or was that something that you've learned and you've built towards? Because it certainly wasn't for me. It's something I've really had to kind of,
I think the journey started before I become a leader in a leadership role. So as people are aware, I started in motor manufacturing, and it still is a heavily male-dominated industry. And just the general environment and the nature of working doesn't encourage a lot of communication between people about thoughts and feelings, and it's kind of just shut up and get on with things. And I think just generally being involved in that type of environment and going through my own struggles and things, and then seeing different leadership styles, I realized that my ambitions to one day become a leader wasn't necessarily in that industry. And I think my environment made us realize that I wanted something different for myself. But if I was to have the opportunity to then become a leader, I wanted something different for the people around us as well. And that was kind of part and parcel of why I moved into tech and seeking other opportunities in different environments. And when I had the opportunity to stand into my first leadership role, I knew this was a great opportunity to lead by example and start and make a change. And I always advocate for that vulnerable leadership approach. I don't think there's anything strong, powerful in hiding your emotions and like, not like we always say, knowledge is power, and it's the same how we speak about our emotions. Being able to communicate with other people, other human beings, about our thoughts and feelings is extremely powerful, and that's one of the most powerful tools we can use to connect to people. And leadership is all about building connection and understanding each other. So if we as leaders continue down this path that has been prevalent in many industries of covering up emotions and putting on this false front, we continue with this trend of having very disconnected leaders in organizations to the rest of the business and this hierarchy structure. Whereas if we start and lead by example and be more vulnerable as leaders and more in touch with our emotions and share our experiences and share our struggles with others, we build that connection. People can relate to us more as leadership. We become certainly more approachable, and we have much deeper understanding of one another and the people around us. We know and understand different personalities and communication styles and what might trigger somebody else versus trigger ourselves. And I think by doing that, like, that's the pinnacle, really. That's the really inspiring thing for me, is being able to actually open up to that other other side of leadership, and that's something that like I've always wanted for myself and encouraged, but I certainly would like to see more of it across the industry.
Yeah, I'd love to see more of it. And even if you look in tech, and obviously it's always predominantly being quite a male orientated environment. Obviously, there is a big change and shift happening around that, which is great, right? But it's it's been that way for many years. And obviously, with more women coming into technology roles and stuff like that, it's amazing to see. And seeing more women starting to move more into technology leadership roles. That's another great thing there, and having that diversity at leadership level, I think, will just help more, and help people to kind of be more open and talk more, and just so it's not all males that you're talking to. There's a mixture of people and a mixture of experience and emotions and all that sort of thing, and hopefully over time it'll become more natural. It'll become a normal, natural thing to be able to do that and talk to your peers more about the things that you're struggling with. And I've had so many examples of, and I know you have as well, Chris, and we can talk more around our sort of experiences. But as I say, years ago, when I was in my first leadership role, my very first leadership role, I remember I was really struggling in that role, and it wasn't a case as I was struggling to do the role. I was struggling because I was doing the role, I was, and doing it well. But the person I was being led by made it really difficult. And there was no way in hell could I open up to that person. No way in hell. And I was always very inward with my emotions, right? I would very rarely talk about my emotions. If something was stressing me out, it would be in here. That was it. It would be locked up. I'd try and find a way to just hide it away and deal with it myself. Is that kind of situation. But I remember, part of the problem was the fact that I didn't have an outlet to talk to somebody, right? So when when your leader themselves isn't somebody you have a good relationship with, or you feel you can open up to, that is a problem in itself. And so it goes up to all levels, right? In terms of not just you feeling like you can and want to be vulnerable, is having an outlet to be vulnerable too. And I remember in that role, I would go into work every day. I'd love working with my team, but I despised that whole thing around, that style of leadership, or I would even call it leadership management, that kind of thing. But it was only one person. The other people weren't like that. But that was the person that would have been my direct outlet, and back then. So it's really important that regardless of the position you're in, you've got somebody that you feel comfortable to talk to, whether that be a peer or at the next level of leadership, and not just putting it all on your team. Because sometimes it feels like you're putting on your team. Do you know what I mean? It's like if I open up to the team about my issues and stuff like that, I feel like I'm putting on them. Now, they probably don't think that way, right? And I've had to do that more recently with my team, my current team, and they've been brilliant. But it's that perception of like, I need an outlet that maybe isn't the team, and it's kind of like my leader. How do I? So we've always got to remember that, flipping it on its head, that when we're in positions of leadership, we might want to be vulnerable but not have an outlet. So if we flip that around, we need to be the outlet for other people as well. But it's that kind of catch-22 that if you're not in the right space and somebody needs to talk to you, it can be, so it's like that whole chicken and egg situation, right? We need to look after ourselves to look after others, but we also need others to look after us.
Just on that as well, I was just thinking, so if we as a leader want to show vulnerability and encourage our teams to be able to share things with us, and we're that outlet to many, but we don't have that from our leadership, what types of things do you think we can do to try and change that for ourselves and encourage an environment that is more supportive? If, say, you have you're around other leaders, you have people who are kind of at the same level in the business as you, but then they're kind of fine with opening up and understanding each other, like, emotionally, but like you say, that leader who then you report into doesn't necessarily have those characteristics. What do you think you can do to change that?
That's a really good question, man. I'm not sure I've got an answer off the top of my head, because that's where this kind of comes back to what we were talking about having self-awareness, and being able to, be aware of the situation around you and understand and have empathy for other people and stuff like that. And I think, again, coming back to the types of training that leaders get, do they get that sort of training to help them be more self-aware and, ensure that they are that outlet and be comfortable being that outlet for people? Because just because we're able to share our emotions now and be vulnerable doesn't mean everybody can do it, right? It's something you either feel comfortable with doing or you don't, and it's really hard to help somebody do that, especially when they may be more senior than you in a position of leadership.
Yeah.
How can you help them, I guess, is the question. And other than kind of trying to talk to them and help them try and understand where you're coming from, but also why you need them to be, more willing to listen, willing to accept and acknowledge what's going on. I don't actually have an answer to that.
I was
So I'm gonna throw it back at you, man.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I was thinking kind of like a bit like the herd mentality. So I think if you've got people, you will naturally gravitate towards certain personality types and get a feel for who is kind of more open than others. And I think through building connection and finding those people in the leadership around you, it's important to acknowledge what we need as individuals, but what we need as a collective as well. And I think when we find people who are able to open up in the same way as us, we can then leverage that community feel and spirit, and be more open in forums where our leadership group, say, is maybe not as forthcoming with being open with their emotions and things like that. We can bring some of our discussions to forums where they're in as well, to say these are the types of things that we're encouraging, and that we need and acknowledge as a leadership group of how we can support each other. So they're more self-aware of like our needs and desires as individuals and as a group. And then they can start and build up an understanding from their perspective of how they can better support us as leaders, because we're openly saying the types of things that we're encouraging and wanting, I think it gives those leaders who are like I say, a bit more resistant to opening up, that opportunity to contribute in one way or another, and know that we're beginning to create safe spaces. We are very supportive as a team, and they will start and get a feel that if they do open up, that it's a bit more of a safe space. They're not going to be challenged on that. We will respect, obviously, their thoughts, views, and opinions to the group. And I think over time, through kind of repeat behaviour and stuff, we can start and change that narrative and make people who, like I say, are not as naturally inclined to share their feelings know that they can do that. And I think it just takes a few instances where they do maybe share a little bit about themselves or try and support us in a slightly different way. And by doing that, they realise, hey, it wasn't so bad after all. Maybe it's what they were thinking in their head of how they were going to be perceived never really come to light. And then it starts to change that narrative over time. So I think it's a gradual process, but I think we need to lean on community of people with similar sort of thinking to encourage that kind of change over time. Whereas I think if you just went to an individual on a one-to-one basis, I think that would never happen. I think, again, it's like leading by example, and we can do that as leadership communities. And to your point before, we don't see leadership communities within organizations or across LinkedIn and different platforms talking about these topics. And maybe that's the starting point, those who feel encouraged and empowered to do so. Sharing experience is such a positive thing that brings people together. And by doing that, we start and build up communities who are thinking alike and want to force change for the better. And then we start and create a new wave of thought leadership. And hopefully we can start and change how we interact as human beings.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think it's that ally movement, isn't it? Initially finding allies that you can then, bring on that journey and grow into a community. I'd love to see more, and maybe this is something that we can do through our forums, Chris, in terms of just starting to bring more leaders together to talk about this kind of thing. And yeah, there's two parts to it, right? There's the part of, as a leader, being self-aware and focusing on self-care and leading by example, and then there's the other part of ensuring that you are comfortable with people being vulnerable to you. Because I've worked with people and had managers that have been brilliant, right? You can open up to them and they handle it really well, whereas others, you immediately know they're like, it doesn't feel comfortable. And they sort of prefer not to be in this conversation right now. And that's one of the worst things. If you're opening up and you're seeing somebody with a really sort of like defensive body language, or it then makes you feel like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be saying this, right? And it's not that person's fault necessarily. It's just what makes them uncomfortable. So how do we help people become more comfortable with that sort of type of situation? Again, obviously we went on that mental health first aider training, and they talk about this sort of stuff and how you obviously listen to people and actively listen, and there's a lot of coaching type skill sets in this, right, as well. But how we help people feel comfortable in those situations to be the receiver of that vulnerability, and do it in a way that doesn't sort of negatively repel the other person ultimately, to kind of go, oh, actually, do you know what, this is I'm going to shut down now because I don't feel comfortable now. Do you know what I mean? So maybe that's something that we can do. Maybe that's something we can start looking at more, and if anybody wants to be part of that, and come along and chat to us more about sort of being in leadership positions and how we can kind of come together more as a community and talk about this stuff more and help each other. Just get in touch with us, because there's definitely something there we need to tap into. And actually, if anybody knows of any communities or allyships that are out there that maybe we don't, we're talking from our own experience here, but if there is anything out there, then again, let us know, because it'll be great to be able to tap into something like that and have that kind of forum to talk about these things more openly, because it's hard. It's really hard, and as I've said, it's I've been going through some stuff recently, and I've made myself worse because I didn't want to be vulnerable, and I just wanted to sort of not pretend that my health issues weren't going on, but just keep them under wraps and not put them on anybody else, right? And I wanted to be the same person day in, day out in front of people at work, and be that person in a leadership role that is kind of like the expectation of who I am as an individual, smiling, energy, all that sort of stuff. And it's made me worse. It's made me more ill, essentially, because the physical issues then become the mental issues. Right? And then you're battling, and you're wearing a mask, and you're conscious you're wearing a mask, and you're dealing with this sort of stuff on a day-to-day basis. And for me, more recently, it's just got to the point where I've had to say, do you know what? I've got to acknowledge that I can't keep doing it the way I'm doing it, because every day is draining me of energy, both mentally and physically, because I'm trying to still be the same person under completely different circumstances. And it's not, and I've had to convince myself that obviously it isn't me giving into the issues that I'm having. It's acknowledging the fact that things aren't, this is just how they are right now. And then accepting that, and then talking to people about it, and I've opened up to my boss, and I've opened up to my leadership, my broader leadership team about it. And that's taken a lot, because I've not worked, I've not been in my new role for very long. So I've put a lot of trust in people, and they've been superb. Honestly, they've been brilliant. But sometimes that's what we need to do, is just take a step back, acknowledge, and then not necessarily take a chance, but just put your trust in others, right? And just be vulnerable and open up about what's going on. And it's made, whilst I'm still suffering, it's made a big difference just being able to talk about what's going on. And those that follow me on LinkedIn will know that I put a post out on LinkedIn this last week, basically just saying that just because somebody's smiling doesn't mean they're okay. So mine is an absolute mask, especially over the last several months. It's been gradually, I've been in more distress, more pain, more this, more that, but I didn't want to show it, and I didn't want to admit. I didn't want to admit to myself that I couldn't be the person I normally am, because I want to be that person for other people, and that's the problem. So to have an outlet is just so important, an outlet that you trust. And sometimes you don't know if you can trust people until you take that chance to tell them. But You
I
sometimes just got
suppose
to do it.
that ties back to the point you made, like at the start of the podcast, like just acknowledging it's okay not to be okay.
Yeah.
And I think one thing we can do for others as well is a lot of the time we will ask somebody who seemingly doesn't seem okay. We'll say, "Are you okay?" And they'll say, "Yeah, I'm fine." But I think sometimes don't leave it there. It's important to ask the same question again as a follow-up. Are you really okay?
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, it's the second time you ask it where you uncover a lot of information about how that person's feeling, you know, because you're giving them a second chance to open up. And by asking it for a second time, you're saying, without saying it, this is a safe space and I'm concerned. Let's talk about it. Let's see how I can help you and stuff as well. So that's certainly like one thing we can do to other people around us to help each other, you know. And I think we can help ourselves by just being comfortable knowing that we don't have to be on cloud nine every single day, and it's okay not to be okay, you know.
Yeah.
I was thinking there as well, like when we just something for our listeners to kind of like take away, and when we were talking about leadership and how do we encourage other people to open up and things like that? It doesn't have to be like a sit down therapy session, lock yourself in a boardroom and say, everybody tell us how you're feeling and open up and everybody's crying at the end of the session and hugging each other. It doesn't necessarily have to look like that. It can if you want, but it doesn't have to be like that. But I think some of the exercises that you can do, one of the ones that I find is quite an eye opener, especially with leadership, is we get stressed a lot, right? There's a lot of responsibility on our plate as leadership, and we're normally juggling many plates at the same time. And I think one thing we can do as a group exercise, and I encourage you to Google it and check it out, it's called the stress bucket, is to get a little printout of a bucket. And what you can do is basically get people to fill that bucket of all of the things that are stressing them out, and fill it right to the top. And then ask them again, similar to what I've just mentioned, like when you say to somebody, "Are you okay?" You've got to ask them again. And when you ask them for the second round of the things that are stressing them and you start having a conversation about it, you quickly find that there's actually more things that are stressing them out. But hey, they've already filled that bucket. So what happens? You start getting overspill. And I think that's the point when you can talk as a group, like, these are the things that are overloading us and stressing us out emotionally. And I think by doing that and having an open conversation about the things that we're trying to juggle in on a daily basis, we connect sometimes some of the situations within our lives and the things that we're doing to then emotions and how that's making us feel. And I think doing exercises like that is a really good way to find more out about each other and find more about ourselves without even necessarily having to ask a lot of questions. It's just actually talking about normal topics within leadership, the things that we're doing on a daily basis and the challenges that we're facing. So I'd encourage people to look into the stress bucket exercise. And we'll probably put a link in the chat when this goes out, just to that you can probably click on it and have a look at. But I encourage you to try it out with your team and let us know how it goes. And if anybody else has got anything that they would recommend and would like to share that they've done to encourage more conversations and openness and leadership, then please share it with us as well.
I think, the stress bucket exercise is a really good one, both on a personal level and a team level. And I think that there's another part to it as well, Chris, isn't there, in terms of the tap? And how you can release some of that stress and your coping mechanisms and the things that kind of help you relieve stress, and talking through some of that as well. And obviously, first of all, you got to acknowledge that you've got these things going on, and sometimes you don't even realize. It can be all of a sudden you can be like, why am I feeling so stressed? It's this tiny little thing that's kind of making you really stressed. It's not, though. It's all those other things. And like you say, it's the build up and build up and build up. And then it's that one little thing that you think has kind of tipped you over the edge. So doing the stress bucket exercise is a really great way. I mean, I'm a massive fan of visualization, and it's a great way to visualize really what's going on in your own personal space and your own life. And and the thing is as well, being at work is only part of who we are, right? We have other things going on in our lives that will also will be owning the burden of, or the stress of, or and sometimes they're the things that you don't really want to talk about. As talking about the stresses of work to other work colleagues is probably the easier part. Things that on a more personal level, like from my perspective, my health, my physical health, that's a bit more personal to me. So it becomes a little bit harder to kind of talk about. So sometimes doing that exercise for yourself in your own space, in your own time, just so you can kind of build more awareness of what's going on in your world as a whole, can be really, really powerful. And then turn the tap. What will help you release some of that stress, whether that be exercise, reading, just being outside, so many different things that potentially can help alleviate some of that stress. And if you do them regularly enough, then you'll find over time, things will improve a little bit. But for me, the biggest release is talking about it still. Just being able to talk and have that outlet to talk to whoever that might be. And you spend most of your time with your work colleagues, right? So if you can open up, to those around you, and you've got those outlets at work, then amazing, right? I don't know where I would be right now without being able to do that, because I'd have days where I'm literally breaking down on a personal level because I couldn't deal with both things in my life. Brand new job, and the expectations of that, and as well as dealing with the unknown of what's going on with me, but also knowing that I'm in a lot of discomfort and pain and stuff, on a daily basis, and dealing with that. Just being able to talk about it, and even just talking about it here on this podcast, right, which is going out to many, hopefully in years to come, millions of people, millions and millions, makes a massive difference. Just makes a massive difference. And it doesn't need for somebody to be talking back to you. Just talk and let it out.
I think as well, obviously talking to others is the most, I think, the single most powerfulest thing we can do. But even before that point, I think there's things we can do to as well help ourselves. And I think from my personal experience, when I've struggled with things and things become overwhelming, one thing I used to do that was quite harmful to myself, I would say, I get stuck on trains of catastrophizing my thoughts.
Yeah.
And for the last 18 months, I've been working with clinical psychologists and going through therapy, and it's one of the most rewarding and powerful things I've ever done in my life. I found so much out about myself. And during that, Neil, my therapist, had actually asked us to start and make a diary. And I've never been one for writing things down or keeping a diary. But on a daily basis, he would ask us to, in the morning, start and think of all of those things that I'm catastrophizing on and write them all down. But don't do anything with them. It's not a to-do list. Just write them down. And then at the end of the day, give myself half an hour of self-reflection. And at the end of the day, I'd track back through all of those things that were keeping us up at night, that were plaguing me thoughts and stressing us out. All of those things that I thought were big ticket items that I just didn't know how to overcome. And then what I realised is as time passed and I self-reflected at the end of the day, most of them things 8 hours later weren't even an issue.
Mm.
It never actually becomes something other than a thought that was in my head.
Yeah.
And through that daily routine and practice of writing down and putting it on paper so it's out there, I can see it. I'm holding myself accountable to those thoughts and actions and reflecting on it starts to retrain my brain to think differently about my thoughts and what it means to me when I become overwhelmed, and appreciate that when I have those triggering thoughts or feelings, it's okay. It's just emotions, and it's not something that's going to sit with us forever. So I think one thing we can do as individuals, and I would encourage people, if you do suffer with like overthinking or being overwhelmed and the pressures of life, is write it down at the start of the day and self-reflect at the end, and you'll be amazed how powerful that is as a tool, and build the habit of keep doing it, and you'll notice that things really do change for the better in that instance. And I think by doing that as well, we can do it within our workplaces. Look at our Jira boards, basically the same thing. How many instances have we seen where we've added stuff to the backlog? We're like, we need to get this on the backlog. This is a major priority. When are we going to do this? And it's sat there for a year. And then we pick it up and reflect on it, and we go, what was this ticket again? Yeah. But at the time, it was like the house was burning down and we had no water to put the fire out, right? But we've not actually done anything with it. It's just things change over time and perceptions change and our environment changes around us. So I think it's self-reflection is one of the most powerfulest tools we can do to overcome some of these challenges as well. We just don't do enough of it because we get caught up as leaders in the grind of day to day and supporting each other and juggling all these things. But just stop, take a breather.
Yeah, but you make a really, really, really valid point, dude. Like, we do reflection in the workplace about the work we do, right? All the time. It's like, let's do a retrospective. Let's reflect on what went well. What was this? What's that? But we don't do about our personal selves, right? And it's such a, just listening to you talk there, it just makes so much sense. And it's something that I think I'm going to start doing. In fact, I am going to start doing. Because like you, right, obviously with everything that's been going on with me recently, I've thought the worst things, and, and until I get acknowledgement and understanding and diagnosis of what is actually going on, I'm probably still going to keep thinking about those things. But if I write them down, then at least they're out of my brain. And I think that's the thing, right? It's getting them out of your brain a lot of the time and freeing your head up for other things.
Yeah.
And I've got, I've always got so much going on up here. Always, always, always. A lot of it's good stuff. A lot of it is like creativity and, all the stuff that we're looking to do with, Quality Talks and the podcast and the broader stuff and the website and so much stuff. I was in the shower the other day and I was like, oh, the book. And I had all these ideas about the book. and like, and you just need to get them out there, right? But it's like the creative side, you'll tap away and you'll get the stuff out, but the less creative, the more damaging thoughts, we don't. We keep them in. We tend to keep them in more, and actually, to your point, just listening to you there, it just makes so much sense. Why wouldn't we get them out, either talk about them or in written form?
Because if we keep them in, it's a waste of energy, because we're training our brain that we need to iterate over those thoughts so that we don't forget them. Whereas if we write it down, we don't have to expend any more energy, and we can prioritize our energy on something more positive, because we can always come back to it at a later date, and it's not going to be forgotten. It's there on paper. And also, sometimes what you'll find is when you self-reflect at the end of the day, there is still things that you feel. There's always going to be things that'll come off, and it's no longer an issue. But there'll be things that are still there. But then, back to the JIRA point, when we create work, we assign it priority as well. But you can't really assign all of these things a priority in your head, because everything becomes priority, number one. Whereas when it's written down and you self-reflect at the end of the day, you can go, right, going into tomorrow, this is going to be the priority order of my thoughts. What's most important to me? What has the biggest impact and positive influence on me as an individual? And then go into the next day, and then you've at least prioritized the order of things that you want to get through. But then even the next day, when you self-reflect, them things that were top priority may not even be in that anymore, So it's that constant cycle of self-reflection and prioritizing things that I think's really important to help alleviate some of the stresses and pressures that we feel, especially within leadership roles and stuff as well. And that's a really good self-help tool. But it's also one that you can then bring to conversation with your leadership group as well.
Yeah, and I think just thinking more about as we develop the future leaders, and ensuring that, what we're talking about here is something that people are being developed in a way to become and comfortable with that naturally coming into leadership role. It's so important that, we've had to kind of learn it almost in role and figure some of this stuff out, and some of it's to our detriment, but those people that are our future leaders and are, on that career path, if you're listening to this now, just know it's okay, right? To be vulnerable in a position of leadership. You don't have to ask permission, right? And I think that's the other thing. It's like, I feel like, is this okay? Is it okay for me to be? Don't even ask that question. It's absolutely okay to be vulnerable in a position of leadership and share how you're feeling. So yeah, don't ever think it's not. And I think for me, I spent a lot of time thinking it was the wrong thing. I shouldn't be doing this. I shouldn't be feeling this. I need to keep this in, and that was to my detriment, So anybody that's in a leadership role now, if you're thinking that, then, it's fine. It's okay. Be vulnerable. The expectation there is to lead, leading by example and showing the people around you that it's okay to talk about how you're feeling, and open up and just release some of that stress that you may have, some of that anxiety you may have. And yeah, go on.
I was just going to say as well, because that's just off what you were saying. When we're with our emotions and we talk about the things that are challenging to us, that's when we grow as individuals personally. in the same way, when we're faced with challenges and things don't go right in the workplace, we keep telling people like this is our opportunity to learn from it, and this is when we grow. When things are going all swimmingly in the workplace, we're not really growing at that point. We're just taking over.
Yeah.
And we only learn through failure. And it's the same personally. It's those challenges. They're not things to hide. They're things to share, because that's growth opportunities for us and other people as well. But if we keep putting on the false front and we pretend that everything's okay, there's no growth for us and there's no growth for anybody else.
Exactly. And going back a few episodes when I had Joe Reeves on the podcast, and we were talking about how, how we looking at how different ways to navigate change and the impact that change can have on us. Changes in, our personal being can be really difficult to manage, and changes around us and whatever they are, and having some way of acknowledging that and talking about it and goes a long way to helping, right? And we're talking there about beginnings and endings, and looking at endings of something and a new beginning. How I'm trying to look at things at the moment for me is that I'm acknowledging that this is a new beginning right now, and then this will come to an end, and then there'll be a new beginning, and then and thinking about it, like, I'm not looking too far ahead, just thinking about the next step and the next step and the next step. But acknowledging endings of, this is how I was. I'm not this way at the moment. That's fine. And sort of thinking about what's next, and not necessarily celebrating it, because it's not something I'm going to celebrate just yet, right? But just acknowledging that I'm not the same person right now as I was, and that's kind of like a little bit of an ending there for me. And if anybody that's listening to this right now and wants to hear more about, but on that episode, go back and listen to that episode, because Joe's incredible, and we're going to get her back on. Chris wasn't able to.
Can't wait to meet her.
Exactly, right. She's in, like, so good. Like, as such an amazing person as well. But yeah, she's got a lot of advice around this kind of stuff. So yeah, I think, Chris, we're going to have to think about wrapping this up, dude, because we could talk all night on this topic, right? We will continue to talk about this for all the time. But I've really enjoyed just delving into this a bit more. It is an emotional topic, I know. Yeah, obviously, there may be triggers in what we've been talking about for people. So, take some time, look after yourselves, reach out if you just want to have a chat, right, about anything. We're always around. So yeah, is there anything you'd like to kind of finish up on, Chris, before we wrap it up?
I mean, obviously, some of the topics we've talked about is quite hard hitting, but what I'll say is just be kind to yourself, just look after yourselves, and like I say, support each other as well. Like, if there is anything that you can take away from this episode, then that's great. But also, if you would like to contribute and you think there's anything that could help us and what we've talked about, or the community as well, share it with us. We're here to support one another and the community that we stand for. So yeah, any kind of thoughts and contributions is always welcomed. And like I say, if you do want to reach out at any point, then me and Stu is here. But yeah, like I say, we can wrap that one up for the day.
I think, just thinking ahead, I think what we can do now we've got the website up and running is, I think we should throw out a blog post around this, Chris. Get that up on there with some of the things we've talked about, some of the coping mechanisms. Just drop that into the blog on the website. So yeah, everybody keep an eye out for that. But also, as we said earlier, we'll look at doing something more around this moving forward. So Not quite sure what yet, but we'll look at doing something more and bringing it to life more, creating a bit more of a community around it so we can bring people together and talk.
Well, we name dropped earlier on, and we haven't asked her, but maybe if she listens to this podcast, she might be wanting to come back on, have the opportunity to come on. But Lisa Wisher, maybe that's the one for a future episode. And I just love it how some of the harder hitting topics she's able to, like you said before, put that spin on it into such a positive, fun and engaging way. So Lisa, if you are listening, we'll be reaching out to you, see if you're interested, because we think the listeners could definitely benefit from some of your wisdom and the way in which you deliver. But I think that could be one for a future episode.
Yeah. My favourite quote, Chris, of that training, I think you may remember it or may not remember it. I'm probably going to completely bastardize this right now, right? But it went along the lines of something like this, right? It's all about having empathy, right? So just because somebody, you may not get on with somebody, this, that, and the other, don't assume that they're a dick. Okay? But also, sometimes some people are just dicks. Right? And sometimes some people can't be helped, right? And I think that's something else that we should think about in terms of, there are people that, we can't help, we can't support, we can't, and that's okay. We can do what we can do, but we shouldn't put it all on ourselves as leaders as well, to try and correct a wrong that maybe can't be corrected, right?
Yeah.
So something to think about. But it was just how it was pitched. I told you, I know I bastardized that, but it was how it landed in the moment it was brilliant. So yeah, but it's just something else to think about. We can put so much energy into trying to make this perfect environment for people and stuff like that, and sometimes it's just not possible, right? And we've got to accept that, and not burn ourselves out trying to do things that just can't be done. All right, so just something to think about, and end on that note. So yeah, thank you very much, Chris. As always, man, love you loads. It's great opening up like this, and if anybody has anything they'd like to share, in terms of like ways to cope with, what we've been talking about, then feel free to drop them in any of the comments on, either on the YouTube channel, on the LinkedIn page when we announce this episode, or just hit us up directly, right? And it'll be great to kind of create a catalogue of ideas around this and how people can cope better. As mentioned earlier, we launched the website. There's going to be a lot more content on there. We're going to put more stuff on here. We talked about just doing a blog as well. And I definitely think there's scope to do more around this. Maybe Chris will hit a conference sometime and talk about this more as well. Open it up to the wider world. Because once you put it out in the universe, right, it's out there, and that's something to remember. Like kind of what you were saying earlier. Write it down. It's out there. Yeah. It's in the universe. As always, thank you to everybody that listens, watches us, subscribes. We've made it over 200, on our way to 300. Let's keep pushing.
Let's make it happen.
Let's make it happen. Absolutely. We can't thank everybody enough. We love doing this, and hopefully you get a lot of enjoyment and value out of what we're doing. And there's going to be a lot more coming from Quality Talks as a whole over the coming months. So definitely keep tuned in and watch this space. And if you want to contribute in any way, just let us know. That's it from us. I'm going to say goodnight. Right, Chris?
I'm definitely going to say goodnight.
You're going to say goodnight, right? So Chris has been sat on his couch, and I can tell he's like in a little bit of sleepy mode. So we'll wrap this up.
Sinking into it now.
Exactly. So thank you, everybody. Really hope you've enjoyed this discussion. Look after yourselves, please. Make sure you're okay, and just take some time to reflect. And join us next time for another episode of Quality Talks podcast. Good night.
Take care, everyone.